All right, so are you ready for this? Because today we're diving into some really unusual territory, I'd say.
Yeah, a little out there.
It's this document called Five Starcle Men Big Book. And it's labeled as an excerpt and, well, a copy of PDF, so who knows what that's all about. But anyway.
Sounds promising.
Yeah, right? Honestly, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
It's like finding someone's secret diary,
Yeah.
but instead of, everyday thoughts, it's all these crazy experiences and weird claims.
Yes. It'll jump from, everyday stuff to these totally wild scenarios.
Right. Keeps you guessing what's real and what's just in this person's head.
Yeah, exactly. And with all that, there's still some, pretty clear themes that come up over and over again.
And that's what we're here to do, try to untangle all that, right? See if we can, understand anything from this jumbled up story.
Yeah, and maybe, get a little bit of a sense of the person behind it all, too.
Totally.
One thing that really stood out to me was this constant back and forth between the narrator, seeking out conflict, picking fights, and then almost enjoying feeling dumb or like a dork.
Yeah, that is strange.
It's like a weird thing, right?
Yeah, and the way they describe it is so strange too. They say, I like to fight and I like to get mad. I will like to feel like a dork and as stupid as I can. I mean, it's like they're actually trying to feel powerless.
Yeah, and they say it more than once too. Later on, they talk about losing fights on purpose, just to get that real stupid feeling. I mean, who wants to feel stupid?
Good question. It makes me wonder if maybe it's not so much about feeling stupid like we usually think of it, but more about wanting to give up control.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe they need to escape from always being in charge, to let go of responsibility for a bit.
So maybe it's not really about feeling dumb, but more about being vulnerable.
Yeah, possibly. And it kind of fits with this bigger pattern of self-sabotage that we see all through the excerpt. It's almost like they're pushing themselves to these crazy extremes, testing how much they can handle.
Okay, so we have this tension between wanting to be in control and then choosing to give it all up.
Yeah.
And you said self-sabotage. Does that connect to how much they talk about death? Because, wow, it's everywhere in this document.
Oh, that's a good point. The narrator is definitely fascinated with death. I mean, they talk about killing a cat and dying themselves multiple times and even making this creepy invention that lets them see death across different lifetimes.
Ugh. Yeah, that invention thing was really intense.
It's a lot.
They call it the most powerful drug on the planet. The one that makes people go crazy and take over and kill in the worst way.
Chilling, right? Makes you wonder, is this a real invention? Or are they talking about something else? Maybe it's a metaphor for feeling totally overwhelmed, drowning in information or experiences to the point where it feels like dying.
Right, sensory overload pushing them to the edge.
Yeah.
Especially when we're already trying to figure out what's real and what's imagined in this whole thing. It's all very hazy and dreamlike.
Totally. The way they go from ordinary things to these totally bizarre scenarios is so jarring. One minute it's everyday life, and the next they're saying they can travel through dimensions with a free life pass, or selling a book of messages from God to aliens.
I know. That part made me think maybe we're dealing with someone who's struggling with mental health or maybe substance abuse. It's hard to know what's really going on versus what's happening inside their head.
Right, and that's what makes this so tricky.
Yeah.
Are we supposed to take these stories literally, or is there some deeper symbolic meaning behind them? It's tough to say.
It really is. And then to make it even more complicated, we have these symbols that keep showing up, the five Starcle men and Starcle Manie. They seem important, but it's not at all clear what they mean.
Yeah, those symbols are really interesting. We see them connected to things like transmission concerts and protecting the narrator from bullets and even showing up on swing sets in a playground.
It's like these symbols are trying to make sense of all the chaos, they're reaching for something solid in this world that's constantly changing.
I like that. Maybe they represent this deep need for order, a way to impose some kind of structure on a reality that feels like it's falling apart.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this. What do you think, listener? What are your first impressions of this narrator and what they're going through? Are you as confused as I am?
Yeah, it really is trying to put together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half don't even seem to belong to the same puzzle.
I know, right? It's so weird because I keep switching back and forth between feeling bad for this person and just being completely baffled by them.
Yeah.
It's 1 minute they're talking about wanting to be famous and escape their normal life, and then the next they're describing these crazy experiences that make you wonder if they're even in touch with reality.
I think that's what makes this document so interesting, this tension between the ordinary and the extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's like they're drawn to like the normal comforts of life, but they're also craving something bigger, something beyond everyday life.
Yeah. I see that. They talk about wanting to turn into an individual person who wished I was famous and using drugs to have hallucinations. It's like they want recognition, to feel important in a way that goes beyond their reality.
For sure. And it makes me think about how common that is, wanting to break free from our routines and do something amazing.
Yeah.
We might not all express it like this narrator does, but I think most of us can relate to wanting our lives to have meaning and purpose.
Totally. It's like a basic human need to leave our mark on the world,
Exactly. And sometimes that need can lead us down some pretty weird paths, as we're seeing with this narrator.
Speaking of weird paths, can we talk about that part where they describe being stuck in an animal's body in some government research dimension? Woof.
Yeah, that section is really disturbing.
Intense.
The way they talk about it, it's not just being physically trapped, it's like their consciousness is merging with the animals, like they're losing themselves. They say, animals experience your thoughts. In other words, I thought I was trapped in the body of an animal.
I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Losing your sense of self, experiencing the world through an animal's senses. It sounds like a total nightmare.
It does, doesn't it? It makes you think about the nature of consciousness, the boundaries between our minds and the outside world, and how fragile our sense of self really is.
Right, and how much control we really have over our thoughts and perceptions. Because even after this awful experience, they find a way to take back control in this really unexpected way. They say, so now that I knew I was this crazy, I used this to give me superpowers. And I lived in TV shows.
It's like they're taking this horrible thing that happened to them and turning it into a source of power. A way to escape into a world where they're totally in control. It's pretty amazing and also kind of scary how resilient they are.
Yeah, it's definitely not a normal reaction to trauma. It makes me wonder about storytelling in all of this. The narrator seems to go back and forth between just observing these things and then actively creating their own reality.
That's a really good point. It's like they're constantly rewriting their own story, blurring lines between what really happened and what they wished happened, or maybe even what they're afraid might happen.
And in all that rewriting those symbols, we keep talking about the 5 Starcle men and Starcle Many. They become like anchors, points of reference in this sea of ever-changing experiences.
It's like they're clinging to those symbols, trying to find something solid and constant in all the chaos and uncertainty of their world.
Yeah, maybe they represent this deeper desire for order, for meaning, in a world that feels so fragmented and unpredictable.
I think that's a really smart way to look at it. It speaks to a very human need to make sense of our experiences, to find patterns and connections that give our lives meaning, even when things are absurd or impossible to explain.
It's like they're trying to force a structure, a belief system onto a reality that just doesn't fit into neat categories.
Exactly. And that struggle to reconcile our inner world with how complex the outside world is, that's something we can all relate to, even if we don't express it in such dramatic ways as this narrator.
Yeah, I think you're right. So as we keep digging into this document, let's keep that in mind. We're not just trying to decode the ramblings of one person, but exploring these universal themes of identity and control, and searching for meaning in a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable. It's funny, as we've been talking, I keep thinking maybe this narrator is trying to balance these extreme and often really disturbing experiences with this deep need for something simpler, more grounded.
Yeah, I see that too. This back and forth between these huge claims of power and then wanting to feel stupid or just blend in. It's wild.
Right. It's like they're going from thinking they can control reality itself to wanting to just let go of everything and be normal.
Such a strange contradiction. They talk about being able to turn into gods, but then also wanting a regular job and experiencing all the boring parts of life.
I know. Makes you wonder if all this talk about power is actually a way of covering up feeling powerless in other parts of their life. Like maybe it's a defense mechanism, a way to feel like they have control when so much of their life feels out of control.
I think that's a really interesting idea. It's like they're building this whole fantasy world where they have ultimate power to make up for all the times they feel trapped or manipulated or just overwhelmed by life.
Yeah, and maybe those symbols we keep coming back to, the 5 Starcle Man and Starcle Many, are part of that too.
How so?
Well, they always seem to show up during moments of crisis or change. They're these anchors of meaning in the middle of all the chaos.
I get it. Remember how those metal-plated Starcle Minis appear to protect the narrator from bullets? And the 5 Starcle Men tapes seem to offer comfort and direction during those times when they're really struggling emotionally?
Exactly. It's like These symbols represent strength and stability, something they can rely on when everything else feels shaky and unpredictable.
And wanting that stability, something that goes beyond the uncertainty of everyday life, that's something we all relate to, don't you think?
For sure. I think we all look for those things, those anchors of meaning that help us understand our place in the world. Like whether it's religion, spirituality, relationships, or even just a deep connection to nature or art.
Yeah, exactly. We all want to feel like we belong, like our lives have purpose, like we understand where we fit in. And this document, as weird and confusing as it is, gives us this little peek into one person's very unique and often really strange search for meaning.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. If you were to look at your own thoughts and experiences, what themes or symbols would you find? And what would they tell you about your own journey, your own search for meaning in this sometimes crazy and unpredictable world?